started called the Regional Landlord Campaign. The Metro Mayor's Caucus is supporting that. And with such a low vacancy rate and such high rent rates here in Boulder, when we get, for instance, when people get vouchers, there's a certain amount of federal voucher money, which is rent subsidy that people could qualify for, and a certain amount of that flows into Boulder. People with vouchers have a big challenge actually using them here because there's so little vacancy. Landlords have people just really lined up for those units, and people who've been homeless might have issues such as, for instance, bad credit. Once you've kind of had a bad economic situation that's gotten you into homelessness, for instance, your credit's probably not that great, and so they have a really tough time competing sometimes for the very limited units available. And so one of the things, and this is not just a problem for us, it's a problem for the whole 7-county region, and so there's a landlord campaign underway to try and really encourage people to take people with vouchers. These bullets on this slide are results from 2014 for our Human Services Fund, and so that's funding that the City of Boulder, we have a much broader pool of goals and funding that's part of the Human Services Fund than homelessness, but we pulled out some results because the organizations throughout the city that we fund to provide homeless-related services, they, as well as all of our Human Services Fund recipients, they fill out output and outcome results forms, reports for us every year. So we pulled some results from just our funded services, our homeless funded services from 2014. And these are some examples that, I think lots of folks in the community don't realize the really great work that's going on every day. But we have many, many people getting help with housing, getting help with basic needs services, and getting services such as employment or mental health services that they need in the community. And this is how the dollars break down on that. So annually through our Human Services Fund, there's approximately $700,000 that we usually devote to homeless specific services. There's another approximately $600,000 that goes to nonprofits who are definitely serving homeless people, but they're for low-income people in our community overall. And so those aren't just homeless-specific services, but they are services that people who are homeless might access and can access. And then in addition, an example of some of our capital investments. So some of those projects that I mentioned earlier, such as the 1175 Lee Hill permanent supportive housing or the Bridge House ready-to-work transitional housing. Between 2008 and 2014, the city invested about $4 million in those types of capital investments. Next steps, we have ongoing work on all the action items in progress. We're going to have ongoing dialogue with the community and with stakeholders such as city boards and commissions, such as yourself, to get input on homelessness strategy and the homeless action plan over the next several months. We have another city council study session in late October that's going to be combined with the human services strategy update. We will be refining the framework elements into a draft homelessness strategy document in the fall. There will be additional opportunities then for community and stakeholder input on that with council adoption of the strategy plan for the first quarter of 2016. And we have a great deal more information on the subject on our website.
We'd be happy to answer any questions you have or more information for you. And as I mentioned earlier, we will be coming back to you specifically about the homeless strategy and some of those initiatives later this summer.
Yeah, I don't really have some extra information on this, but on Edge with the whole PD, do you have any statistics being collected? How's the effectiveness of that engaged? And do you have an update?
Yeah, that's in a pilot phase in Boulder right now with the Boulder Police Department. So they are collecting data and there will be information that's available. This is a pilot program that expires in 2016. So we'll be assessing what that data looks like and how we extend that program. Anecdotal information from the Boulder Police Department and mental health partners. They say that it's been highly effective. It's also been implemented in the city of Walmart and with the Boulder County Sheriff's Department.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just want, on those kinds of things, it's good to collect data while we can, because it's a big issue with us, I think. So at the homelessness study session I went to last fall, which viewed, it seems to me that a big issue that came up was the lack of data collection in specific places, and then also lack of exchange of data between different providers. And I just want to know, in between then and now, what has been done about that, and what different providers been doing.
Yes, data collection, although it's not a very exciting topic. Data coordination and sharing of information is very problematic. You know, historically, this isn't anything specific to Boulder, but historically, the nonprofit and human services serving communities, really, the data and information that was collected to help clients and develop case plans was really just about the services that that agency offered. So there's a lot of data collection, a lot of case management, but it's not shared. It's generally not shared among agencies so that there's coordination of the services that are provided, there's integration of the services that are provided, and to be able to track outcomes across the system rather than outcomes across one agency. We heard this pretty loud and clear through another effort, and that was the flood recovery effort, which is pretty devastating in this community. And what we heard from people, because there were so many people and so many good agencies jumping in to help, we had a lot of people contacting people to ask them what their needs were, you know, where and how and when they needed services. They were basically significantly case managed. 7, 8 people contacted families and individuals to really help assess what they needed. And what we heard from people was, stop sending people to ask me what I need and just get it to me. And that's a bit of a kind of a metaphor for how really wonderful agencies across the country really historically have served people in the community. Individuals go agency by agency to get the services they need, and what we're trying to do with this systems reform, system integration, and coordination is have all these services behind the curtain so that we're not sending people from one door to another door to another door, making phone calls to a variety of case managers, filling out lots of different paperwork and assessments, but really have kind of this model of through any door. You could go through any door and you could get a comprehensive set of services. You could have one case manager go through one assessment, and it's really all the agencies and the staff behind the scenes that's coordinating all of that so that we're reducing the burden and the barrier on the individuals who are seeking services. Data is one way of sharing that information, but it's complicated. We have different funding sources that have different requirements. They use different platforms for collecting data. For example, the federal government has a requirement that federal grantees use a federal system called HMIS. The state has a different platform that they require people to use. We have different funders. We have different requirements. So kind of coordinating all of this so that it's as user-friendly as possible is a pretty significant challenge. But it is a high priority for us because you can't measure long-term outcomes for people unless people are sharing information and they're sharing data, and we make it as easy as possible for service providers to be able to collect it and share it and use it. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying Keel. It's, everybody is talking about it and thinking about it and actually doing some work on it. Boulder County is probably the one entity that has made significant progress on developing a platform for data repository, so that all these multiple ways of collecting data and information, not every agency has to have the same software and use the same system, but there's a way of collecting that information, this variety of information, downloading it into a data warehouse, and then extracting the common elements related to services that are provided to clients, so that you can measure outcomes long-term across the system. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and so just it ties into the next question, which is, so like, a lot of the funding and what the city is doing, it seems that preventing homelessness before it happens and moving people out of it as quickly as possible is seen as the best way to not have a homelessness issue. So since the floods, with the focus on resiliency and the discussions on that in the city, and then even having the city position filled, does that play in with what you guys are doing with the homelessness plan? It seems there might be some
Yes.
overlap in that, and some good synergistic opportunities.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So just a follow-up to Nikhil's question about the EDGE program. I'm not sure if, I made this request through Human Services for the police department, but, I would imagine that the police department might want to collect some data about who is being diverted to this mental health partners.
Yes, they are.
Along racial and ethnic lines.
They are collecting data. I don't know if that's one of the variables that they're collecting, but we could check with them on that.
Yeah, I just think it has to be, because when you're looking at diversion programs, you want to know who gets to be diverted and who doesn't get to be diverted, and who's seen as somebody well-suited for community mental health services and who's not, along racial and ethnic lines. I would be interested
So I'm
in that.
not sure what you mean by diverted.
Well, if there's an incident out in the community that requires the call for service involvement of law enforcement, and in that process, the law enforcement officer determines that this person is well-suited for or needs the services of mental health partners versus being arrested, booked, or cited.
Yes, I think the way it works is if they get a social welfare call, the mental health therapist goes with them. They don't go on the call and then call the mental health therapist. A therapist is actually stationed at the public safety building. So when they get a call that is related to social welfare of some sort, and it appears as though mental health services would be helpful, that person goes along with them. The police don't go on the call and then call a mental health therapist. That person goes with them on the call.
On the call for
On the call,
service.
yes.
So it's through the call that the police officer determines that he or she
Yeah,
needs that.
it's at the initial call. Yeah.
Okay. So it's not a
It's not a diversion program, it's a mental health program. So if a call comes into public safety, and through the description of the call, it's a social welfare call, or mental health services could be helpful on the call. The mental health therapist, because they're stationed at the public safety building, goes with the police officers on the call.
I see, okay. That's different than how I understood it
Yeah.
in the beginning, okay.
It's not really a diversion program, it's a mental health program. It's to get mental health resources
Yes,
and access
okay.
to mental health services as quickly as possible on the call,
Yes.
so that there's not an interval of time with the police making then a referral to the mental health
Right,
facility
okay.
to get this person some help.
And if a crime has been committed, then I think
Well, yeah, it's a mental health program, not a crime diversion program. But if a crime has been committed, that's why there's some discernment of whether it's a social welfare call when the call comes in to the station.
And I grabbed the mic just to get some clarification. Probably need some, scenarios, some typical things where, the mental health partners person was helpful in assisting or even help kind of diagnosing the situation, understanding the situation. And then maybe also where there wasn't a role for that.
Yeah,
know a little
yeah,
more about
so
that.
we could get
It's
you
not my
some more
area.
information. I'm pretty sure the mental health partners and the police department are collecting data on the program, and we could get you an update on what that information is today. I don't know when they're actually developing a formal report, or they're doing the pilot, but we could get you that information.
Okay. And then, if I may, so I understand that the focus, is more on, so the prevention piece, right? Preventing homelessness, I would imagine that takes you to what causes homelessness. So that would, the reasons for homelessness, you're saying?
Yes.
Right? So if you want to prevent it, you need to understand what caused it. So I'm just curious about the domestic violence services and these reasons why folks are saying that they're homeless. Are there certain?
So why domestic violence is causing homelessness?
No. So I'm not saying this very well. So you're saying that one of the strategies is to focus on preventing homelessness, which I would imagine then that takes you to the reasons for homelessness, one of which was domestic violence, but then I didn't hear anything about domestic violence services.
So there's a variety of early intervention services. I don't know that they're specific to domestic violence. So for example, rental assistance or mortgage payments. If someone has lost their job and if there's early intervention for that family, they can receive financial counseling, maybe financial assistance, transitional assistance to help pay their rent or their mortgage or whatever it is they need to be able to stay in their home until they're economically back on their feet. So early intervention and prevention with the assistance that's available across the community to help their families stay in their home could be a prevention strategy. Rapid rehousing is a strategy. So if someone is about to lose their home, then finding a replacement home as quickly as possible rather than waiting until the family is homeless. So specifically to domestic violence and how you intervene so a family doesn't end up on the street. In a domestic violence situation, there's certain services and programs that families need to stay safe. I don't know specifically from a prevention standpoint what those would be, but the prevention strategies apply kind of across the board, and what that means is early intervention, intervening early on with the family so that they don't lose their home, or they don't lose, or that they secure another place to live before they're homeless on the street. So I'm sorry, I can't answer your question specifically about what the specific intervention strategy is for victims of domestic violence, so that they don't lose their home. I think from a safety perspective, if you're children and a person in a home with domestic violence, you don't want them to stay in the home. You need a safe house, and you need to be rapidly rehoused as quickly as possible.
Can women and children, or are children part of 1175 Lee Hill, or?
No, that's just for adults.
Where would children go? Homeless families?
So
families
ARPA,
and children.
Emergency Family Assistance, they operate emergency and transitional shelter for families.
So emergency shelters like a week or
A week.
a week stay?
You know, I don't know off the top of my head. Do you know what
I also don't know off the top of my
but it's short term, it's other kinds of.
It's short term,
housing.
okay.
They also have transitional housing, so families can move from emergency to transitional housing. And I think that's 18 months.
Okay, is that the only provider for services with families with children? Because these other ones are not, like you said, Lee Hill is just for adults. I mean, what are the other opportunities for families with children, homeless
So that is the primary family provider.
That's the
for
only one for the
in
city of Boulder.
Boulder.
In the city of Boulder,
Or-
just that
or
one.
Span,
Span? Which one is that?
Safe House.
Oh, Safe House,
If
okay.
you're victim of domestic violence.
Okay, right. Because that's the largest population, is families with children.
It's about half the population.
Half the population, so that's a big
Yeah.
group, right?
Yeah.
I would also add that Boulder County Housing and Human Services, they do have a number of rental assistance programs for families. And so they're not the same as EFA. EFA has a more specific and targeted group of services, but there is assistance, specifically with rental assistance and vouchers available through Boulder County for qualified families. Yeah, great.
And sometimes that includes emergency shelter, hotels, or hotels.
I just had two more questions. So on slide number 18 on page 6, the Human Services Fund 2014 homelessness results, it says 46 people in permanent housing. So that's the ultimate outcome, desired outcome, right? All these, you mentioned like the outputs versus the outcomes. So I'm just curious, if you look at the categories of emergency shelter, transitional housing, and then ultimately permanent, which is what you're saying is now the best practice, what's the gap in the city of Boulder for each? Like, how many slots are we short?
So that's a good question. We know what demand is, but we don't know what need is. So what we really have to ballpark is what the demand is. The big gap in the city of Boulder is the availability of housing. It's, we have limited opportunities for development of housing. You mentioned before that rents were very high, opportunities were very low because landlords have the opportunity, they can choose among renters. And renting to folks with vouchers who may come with some issues that need to be addressed. It's not popular with landlords, and that's the reason why the DHI, the Metro Mayor's Office, is working on this landlord incentive program and landlord outreach program. So the big gap is housing. It's not services, it's a place to put people, housing, permanent housing where someone can go and have the services that they need along with it. That's the big gap.
Right, so regardless of how huge the gap is, we ought to know what it is. Don't we want to know what it is? To see.
So the 10-year plan has identified 100 housing first units across the county. We're pretty close to that across the county. We don't think that's going to be, that was the best guess we had at the time the 10-year plan was developed. But we're getting pretty close across the county because we have 31 units that just opened in Boulder. The suites in Longmont, there's about, what is it, 70, there's about 70 units in the suites in Longmont. Some portion of those are devoted to housing first. Don't know the exact number, but maybe 50 of those. Say half of those units are devoted to family support housing. That's getting us pretty close to that 100 countywide. Well, we know that that's not enough.
And one that's on slide number 15, one of the strategies to prevent homelessness, kind of going back to that question, to support coordination of city and regional programs that help people out of poverty. Is there a Boulder City program that helps people out of poverty?
Circles.
Yeah, there's a couple of circles, Bridges Out of Poverty.
That's the county.
Well,
Action
it's a
program.
county, well, it's a county-wide program, the city of Boulder participates in that. So circles, Bridges Out of Poverty, asset building, involved buildings such as the IDA, the Individual Development Personal Enterprise.
Ms. Ron, could you use the microphone? I can't hear you. Thank you.
The IDA program, Individual Development Account, also known as the Personal Investment Enterprise. And it's a program, a countywide program that's coordinated by United Way. And I'm going to try and remember the specifics off the top of my head, so this might not be exactly right. But it's really a program where the individual saves a certain percentage of their funds that will be matched by the IDA program, and it can be used. And it's matched on a 4-to-1 basis, thank you. Rosie is giving me some pointers over there. 4-to-1 that can be used for starting a business, for skills training, or for college education. So it's actually wealth building, and it's really assets and wealth that leverages people out of poverty. So it's kind of like analogous to, it's not a wealth building strategy to rent, it's a wealth building strategy to own a home, because that is an appreciating asset, whereas a rental is not. So you can actually leverage your investment. So it's kind of a similar thing. How can we help lower income families create wealth to leverage themselves out of poverty, in addition to Circles program, which is also around the culture and values of poverty, and leveraging people out of that culture and that mindset around being successful.
Thank you. So are there any burning questions before I try to land the plane?
Excuse me standing, my baby's hitting my back. How realistic is this plan in terms of permanent housing when this is so closely tied to affordable housing for people who are not yet homeless? And there's tens of thousands of people in line waiting to own a home, and in Boulder County, let alone in the city of Boulder. And when we're talking about only double-digit numbers for houses, it's not nowhere near meeting the need of people who are looking for a permanent home, and much less the homeless.
Well, that's why this is a regional conversation. So just as an example, as I mentioned, Boulder and the city of Longmont are regional housing and service centers. Lafayette has actually built some affordable housing and some and housed folks with vouchers in Lafayette. But when you think that we are a regional service center and housing center along with Longmont, Erie, Louisville, Superior, Lafayette, Netherland, all the communities across Boulder County have a stake in the conversation besides Longmont and Boulder. And that's where the consortium of cities conversation is. It's really new and it's exciting. And for the first time, all of these communities who belong to the consortium of cities, we've been having a conversation with them since December about how can they participate in this conversation, how could they actually develop housing in their communities, or more services in their communities to house and provide services for homeless families and individuals. Because right now, it's Longmont and Boulder. And how can we actually develop resources elsewhere that help this regional issue? Another issue, for example, is the city and county of Bloomfield. They do not have a shelter, and they refer a lot of folks that are homeless in Bloomfield County to Boulder. So this is another regional conversation, and it's a regional conversation around all the communities in the 7 Metro Denver region about who's participating in the development of housing, particularly. That's why the other conversation that's happening countywide with the Boulder County planners to talk about, well, what are the ordinances and land use barriers across all the communities in the county, not just the city of Boulder and the city of Longmont. How are we going to develop more affordable housing and more permanent supportive housing, but how are all of our communities going to participate in this conversation instead of people just migrating to Boulder and Longmont? That's why the 25 cities pilot that Wendy talked about is also really exciting, because this is a 7-county, a Metro Denver issue, significant issue across the whole 7-county region. So how can all the communities between here and Denver be participating in this conversation, developing housing and developing resources? And that's really exciting because we housed some folks from Boulder County in the Denver metro region when resources have become available. So it's a regional, we are not going to solve this problem in the city of Boulder, housing for everyone, for all of our homeless folks and families. We can't house everybody along the continuum, so we are not going to solve this problem alone. And that's why these regional conversations are so exciting, because we have to have them, we have to develop housing in other communities across the county.
Thank you so much for presenting all this information to us and creating a baseline of information for us. I want to turn our attention to what's going to be happening this summer. And if you have some thoughts about the HRC role, with the issue being, well, as city council, do we have a role? An obvious one that I could suggest, of course, is that we're great at holding public hearings. We could certainly assist in that way. The city council might have, some other plans, or have something that they will satisfy that need. But that's right on the corner. So,
yeah. So city council certainly will be holding some hearings, on the plan, but the HRC could also hold a public hearing when we have it more well defined and more community and resident input into the plan.
I'm especially encouraged by the regional approach, and I kind of want to ask the question about your level of hope, and you think that's
Yes.
What's your level of hope?
Yes. So I'm generally an optimistic person to begin with, and I think there is hope because for the first time, really since late last year, when we first presented to the consortium of cities, this was in December, there was some light bulbs that went off because there were a couple of communities that were surprised to know that they had homeless folks in their community. And it may be that they didn't know because if they did have homeless families or individuals, those homeless people left to where there were more robust services and housing and support for them because it wasn't available in their communities. So we provided, from the point in time survey, data to those communities. For example, not the most recent point in time survey, but one of the more recent ones, Lafayette, for example, I believe had 75 individuals who said that they were from Lafayette. Well, that's a lot of people who came to Boulder and were surveyed in the city of Boulder because we had services here and help that they could access, as opposed to maybe being in Lafayette. So I think the conversation has moved pretty significantly since December. We don't have all the communities who belong to the consortium of cities having committed funding. We submitted a request for funding based on population. So City of Long, City Boulder, and Boulder County, of course, with the biggest percentage. But it's really symbolic, even if someone contributes their share of $600 to have this permanent supportive housing study done. And even that's a significant shift that people are willing to have the dialogue and commit funding to the study.
What's the best way for people to give input at this point? We've had people give input here, but what would you recommend?
To provide us with feedback and input?
Provide city council. How about that? I mean, I think that's probably the channel right now, correct?
Well, you can provide feedback to city council, but this is not coming back to city council until the fall.
Okay.
So city council will have an opportunity to see the plan and provide feedback on it until we get through the community engagement process over the summer. So what will happen is all the opportunities for community input and community engagement we will be posting on the website, and I think Wendy is putting that plan together right now, so there'll be a variety of opportunities from community forums to focus groups, a variety of ways that people can have input and feedback, and that will be posted on the website.
Great, thank you so much. Any other questions, commissioners? I think everyone probably, I'll speak for the commission and say this was really worthwhile. Thank you for taking the time. And I'm glad that we are here in this process right now, the month of June. So, great, thank you.